Welcome, welcome to Freaked Out with your psychic medium host, Liz. You know, it is so crazy that we decided to work on the Gypsy Rose episode without really the details of when Gypsy was about to have her baby, and it just kind of happened. So congratulations to Gypsy and Ken on their baby, and I'm glad they're not showing this child on social media. Lord knows enough of those family members have been on social media. It does not need to happen. But I can tell you that baby Aurora is literally Gypsy's identical. As she gets older, you would be able to tell that she is Gypsy's daughter. It's funny because the very same day that I went to post the first video, baby came out. I was just thinking it was just kind of perfect timing, that's all. And you know, it doesn't stop the trolls from trolling. I have seen some very nasty comments about her, like, let the girl be a mother before you make any comments. You have no idea what it is like to be in her position, because it is a very unique situation. So keep your mouth quiet. You want to say things in the comfort of your own home to your people, cool, but you look like a trash mouth when you're going on the internet just saying this, that, and the other. It's terrible. Like, there's freedom of speech and then there's bullying, and those two things are very different from each other. I do want to mention that Aurora is not Gypsy's karma. Do you know what Gypsy's karma is? The guilt that sits inside of her. She had already got her karma. She went to jail instantly. She now has this on her permanent record for the rest of her life wherever she goes. If she can't make money off of the fame side of things, she could potentially have a hard time getting a job. This child is a blessing and a miracle, to be totally honest. With all of those surgeries, I'm shook that she can actually have a child without any sort of problems involved. And the other thing, guys, is Gypsy wanted to be a mother. She wanted that. She wanted to say, hey, I'm going to be a mother to a child. I'm going to do what my mom couldn't do. I'm going to break the cycle. She wanted to leave her mother's home to have a family of her own. And her mother prevented her from doing that for a very long time. But everything happens for a reason. I do not feel as though her daughter is going to be a problem for her, but we will do a prediction on that as well. Maybe if we have time at the end of the video. Now, before we get started on the second half of today's episode, I want you guys to continue to keep pressing that like button. It really does help. And if you are not following us already, get on it. I'm only getting better with time. I also want to mention that I did the write-up on Natalia Grace's episode. Now, I only covered season 1 and season 2. I haven't even watched the third part of the documentary. That is my next goal. So expect to see something Natalia Grace related very, very soon. So where we left off last time, she was getting herself involved with Nick. And by the way, if you've not watched part 1, go watch it before you watch this one, because it'll just ruin the show. So they were headed to the movie theater and came up with this story so Nick can meet her. At this point, she didn't want to kill her mother. She wanted her boyfriend and her mother to meet, and then her mother fall in love with him like she had fallen in love with him. It seems so sweet and innocent at this point. In Gypsy's mind, a lot like many young people, when they concoct stories, even like 90 Day Fiancé, I'll give you that as an example quickly. Whenever people go to meet their people in different countries, a lot of the other countries expect you to just obey their culture and religion. And a lot of people will have to get their parents' permission for being involved in a relationship with somebody else from a different culture, especially in the USA. And they just don't tell their parents in hopes that the parents will just love them anyway. And most of the time, it just never works out. And just based on the way she's doing this, you can tell that she's afraid of her mom and her reaction, and inviting him to a theater rather than for her front door seemed more logical, because she thought, hey, we're in a space where there's other people. Mom won't react a certain way. She thought that this was going to go down magically. But in the back of her mind, she also was afraid her mother was going to lose it. She also figured because her mother really enjoyed going to the movies, and it's probably one of the times that she would be in a better mood. And sadly, it was one of the only things that they ever really did together was go to the movies. Now, Nick obviously wanted to go along with this plan, but his plan only really consisted of having sex with Gypsy. He didn't even care about officially meeting her. He just wanted to have sex, and that was his only stipulation throughout this entire thing. I know that Gypsy had a diaper on and she was on her period and she didn't really tell him anything, but in my opinion, I think he actually enjoys the blood aspect of things. But I just feel like he has and had and still has a lot of impotency issues. Now, I think they're more psychological than physical, but she thought it was because she was on her period and had a diaper on and this whole spiel, but that was not the case. So I'm also pretty sure that before Nick got involved with Gypsy, there was a path down drug road, and that could also have been a big factor to that. I'm also believing that he sexually abused himself too. I just see he did things to his body that our bodies cannot be capable of handling, and that could also be another issue. He is very morbid in his sexual fantasies and really hurt himself quite a bit. So yikes. Now, I gotta tell you, I don't blame Dee Dee for being creeped out by this guy in the movie theater. I don't condone her abuse towards Gypsy because of what happened, but I gotta say, I would also be extremely what is going on here? But I mean, if I knew my kid was in her 20s, obviously my kid's going to make their own decisions for that. I do believe that Nick came off rather creepy, but he could have been on his absolute best behavior. And I think that Dee Dee would have rejected him one way or another, regardless of what he looked like. She definitely did think he was a pedo. She did not like his vibe. And again, stuck in the mindset of her daughter being a child. So she just wanted to keep this predator away. And when she realized that Gypsy had intentionally actually had this guy come, that was the big problem. Gypsy asks a question in her book. Why did Dee Dee let her go to the washroom? She couldn't answer it, but I can. Now, from what I can see from Dee Dee, they don't really talk a lot about this, but I see that Dee Dee she had irritable bowel syndrome. She had a lot of physical health related issues, diabetes. There was just an array of problems. And from what I can see, she was just not feeling well. So her daughter going to the washroom for a brief moment, she figured she could handle herself. So she didn't have to get up. She was feeling lazy in that moment. She was also not under the impression that dude was going to go meet her in the bathroom. If she knew that part at all, she definitely would not have let Gypsy go at all. Now, did Dee Dee really lock Gypsy in the shed when they got home? She absolutely did. Did she leave her there a while? Yeah. Did she leave her there overnight? I don't think so. I can see why Gypsy felt like it was overnight, but I am seeing that she may have left her there for 5 or 6 hours and then came and got her. Dee Dee definitely fell asleep, and Dee Dee did not mean to leave her there that long. I mean, she shouldn't have done it anyway, but that's what I've gotten from the Dee Dee side of things. This was obviously the final straw for Gypsy. She was done trying to accommodate her mother's needs. She always had this vision if she just left her mother would be sad and lonely forever. And she also kind of wanted to avoid that too. I see that there was a layer of anger And I see that there was a layer of anger that was coming out in Gypsy, and she couldn't really place it or figure it out, but she had had enough. She did not want to get into these situations anymore. The abuse was becoming too much for her, and so she decided, I'm done. She started looking up options for herself, like what she can do to get away from her mother. But then there was also the element of her mother constantly lying about her age. She was afraid she was going to get in trouble for that as well. I even feel like she talked to her neighbor Aaliyah about how overbearing her mom was. And I even believe that Aaliyah gave her some friendly advice, nothing crazy, like leave your mother, kill her, nothing like that. It was more so like, well, you do have rights. Although you may be physically disabled, you may have other options if you want more, independency. Aaliyah felt bad for her. I also think Aaliyah was kind of sketched out by Nick, because Gypsy did talk to her about Nick, but I feel like she got the ick from Nick, which, I mean, we all would. I see that she had an extremely emotional moment. She was bleeding, for God's sakes. And I see in that moment, she was crying and crying, and she turned to Nick on the phone and said, look, I need a way out. I think I'm going to have to kill her. Now, Gypsy had mentioned while she was in the shed, she had a dream about Christine and her dad. And I really believe, like she said in the book too, that it was a premonition. And I agree with that. It was something for her to hold on to. Even the Hurricane Katrina stuff, like, I know Gypsy knows a couple of things that happened, but she doesn't know everything. Like, I see that Dee Dee was watching this from the comfort of her own home, seeing the Hurricane Katrina catastrophe and thinking, there's no way for them to be able to track everything. I come in here with my kid, we're going to get away with a lot of shit. And she reached out to many different programs and got money from many different avenues. And it was a lot. And she scored a fuck ton. And from what I can see, she wasn't even close to getting caught with this. Before we get into the part of the deed, which is what Gypsy calls it in the book, the murder itself, I want to talk about Dee Dee's illnesses, her sickness, everything. Now, Dee Dee was not taking care of herself. Ironically enough, she was overly taking care of her daughter to the point of, medical abuse. But she didn't really take care of herself in the manner that she should have. And from what I can see, she was dying. Now, was it going to happen overnight? No. I would say within a good 6 months to 8 month period, if she did not take care of herself. Now, these things could have been fixed. I just don't feel like Dee Dee was going to do what she needed to do to take care of herself, because she would have to have spent some time in the hospital. She would have had to spend time away from Gypsy. And I mean, she probably would have forced Gypsy to go to the hospital here, there, and everywhere with her. But there would be moments that she would be completely out of control. If Gypsy had just waited a couple more months, it would have gotten to the point where she would have gotten to she would have gotten to the point of death or very close to it, and she would have had her freedom. And I believe that her mother would have had to have been taken care of as well, at least until she recovered. So Gypsy definitely had a window that she didn't even realize she had coming up soon. Have I ever done a full-blown Dee Dee channeling session? No. To be totally honest, I don't like her, but she is a better version of herself up there now. I'm just not ready to forgive her. With that being said, I do plan to very soon, within a few weeks, doing a Dee Dee channeling session, talking about things from her perspective. She really wants to give Gypsy a letter more than anything else, and also explain why she did what she did. I also think that if Dee Dee had survived and carried on, within a year's time, she would have been legally found guilty of some major crimes. I don't feel like there was anyone currently suspecting her, but I see that she was still doing some seriously fraudulent things in the background. And from what I see, she would have gotten caught doing something seriously fraudulent. And that may have even led her to go into jail. So I know that Gypsy didn't see this outcome, but it was well on its way. And then Gypsy would have been no one we know. None of this would have happened. Now, from my own personal experience, when it comes to physically and mentally disabled children and adults, they really do fall between the cracks a little more often than a regular child. It's quite literally the saddest thing. Landon works with disabled people, and he's been doing that his whole life pretty much. And I have an autistic child, and I also have a relationship with Landon's brother, who's also mentally disabled. He may be, 29 today, but mentally he's only sitting at a 17-year-old level, if that. And a lot of these times, there's one extreme to the next. Most of the time, these disabled people, physically and mentally, are abused, while others are used as their personal slaves. It's really disgusting. And it happens too often. It's not a current issue in the world. How does that make sense? Now, although Gypsy was not physically disabled and not mentally disabled, she was seen in the world as such. All right, now let's move on to the deed. Now, because Gypsy had reached her breaking point, she asked Nick to take care of business. And Nick had already been alluding to this for quite some time. So she was finally giving in to his suggestion. I think he had suggested for him to kill her, like very, very early on in their conversations, almost instantly, as soon as he found out about the things that she had been forced to do. Now, with zero hesitation, he accepted. But because he wanted it to not be put on his own shoulders, he decided, well, you have to talk to Victor. I really see like these terrible images of Nick's thoughts on his ex-girlfriend and harming her to the point where she would not be breathing anymore. This was like his release for that. It was like, yes, okay, I'm finally going to get to do this to someone, which is another reason why he asked Gypsy if he could rape her mother. Because he wanted, in his mind, to give himself something to think about, thinking about it as his ex-girlfriend, because he wanted to hurt her after she had been killed. And again, violent rage. He even had said to her for them to do it with her being moved to the van and doing it there and raping her. Like, he had some seriously effed up ideas. I even think that there were even more ideas flooded, but I feel like there's just so many things that she decided to keep on the DL because she didn't want to paint him even more of a monster. But yeah, he had suggested for them to do it on the bed next to the mother. Like, he did a lot. Now, the deed itself, he was supposed to show mercy. He didn't do that. He really went to a dark place and enjoyed every second of it. In fact, I feel like he sits in jail and relives and rehashes it and does things to himself. You can only imagine. Now, although his body does not function the way everyone else's, but he like physically hurts his own body, even to this day, surrounding this whole situation that happened. He's a very, very disturbed individual. This was his first kill. Well, his first person kill. I believe that he had killed at least, I would say, 10 animals, including dogs, puppies, squirrels, anything he could find, really. Now, this altar Victor that he has, I've been diving deep into his altars, and Victor being the voice in the back of his mind telling him to do bad things. He often himself would have to tell the voice no. Even the situation where he was in the McDonald's and exposed himself and did all of that, I even feel like Victor was telling him that. Now, is he and Victor like the same person? I mean, yes and no. Nick could have tried to stop his alter from getting to a certain point. There is an element of control pulling them back. It hurts. It's uncomfortable to change, but from what I can see, it's possible. And Nick could have put himself there, but he also, along with Victor, wanted her dead. He wanted many people dead. In fact, I see that now that he can't kill people, he's fiending very hard. I wouldn't be surprised if he has hurt a few people in jail and prison, but I'm unsure of that. There might be something that comes out later with that, though. The way Nick would say things like, I'm the only one allowed to hurt you so that I can hurt you later on. Like, just weird shit. And yes, she did agree to him raping her, but she was very much saying no, but she checked out during that situation. I don't know if he quite got to do what he wanted to do, but I really believe that it would have been a lot worse if he could get it up. Let's just put it that way. I also believe that Gypsy was afraid she was going to be pregnant, but luckily for her, none of that happened. I do see her high through a lot of it. And I don't think she talks about their relationship sexually after the fact for those 5 days that they were free together. I believe that she did submit to him and they did have sex as well. But again, a lot of problems with him performing. I also believe that if the two of them had been able to carry on without getting caught, I believe he would have physically hurt her as well. I see he would have carved her up. I see he would have done some really fucked up shit to her and eventually killed her because she would have left him or tried to leave him. One way or another, though, it looks like that situation would have been completely out of her control. She really has a bad time with choosing men. Now, when it comes to him performing the task of killing her, I see that yes, Gypsy heard it all. And I do believe that there are moments of darkness for her. I also believe she was in the room and may have not necessarily seen a lot of it. She was trying not to see certain things going on because she did have to go into her room and grab a few things. But I think she saw more than she can actually remember. Did Gypsy have second thoughts about this? Absolutely. She even hugged her mother hours before this happened. And she felt like she couldn't stop. She also, I believe, after letting Nick in, thought to herself, if I don't let him in, he might kill me instead. And I wouldn't put it past him. He's not someone who takes things like this lightly. So for instance, no, forget killing her. You don't need to do it. He would have been like, well, I need to kill somebody. So that's either going to be you or somebody else. You let me know. You or your mother. Like, I really believe that he would have done something one way or another. It's crazy because in the book, Gypsy often refers to her mother as two different people. The part that she loved about her, and then the part that was abusive towards her. She tries to separate her mother's illness from who her mother was, but it's difficult because she loves her mother very much, and you can see that through the book. And I know people don't feel like Gypsy is remorseful, and you know what? There might be an element of her that isn't completely remorseful about it, but I don't know. Not everyone has a good relationship with their mothers. I also see that Gypsy to this day has dreams. Nightmares. I think she mentioned nightmares in her book, but from what I can see, they were blood-filled, like soaked sheets. Her mother calling her name, like she's constantly having these little nightmare moments. Even her daughter, she went to go see her sonogram on the day of her mother's death. And Gypsy looks at it like a sign from her mom, like everything's forgiven. And I would agree with that. I believe that Gypsy is definitely in tune with her mother's signs to her, surrounding her and all of the shit she did to her. Now, Nick and her had decided to come up with a plan to tell his parents that Gypsy got kicked out. She was coming to stay because I believe his mom had said something like, you already went to go see her. It's her time to come see you. And I think that was the only way they could get him to leave the house, was for her to be like, no, I need your help because I need to help. I need his help moving out. And the parents agreed. I can only imagine, like, I know these people deserve the karmic things that happened here too, especially the father. But I can only imagine, like, sitting on my couch, watching television, and then all of a sudden a SWAT team just pulls up on my house and wants my son. Like, I couldn't even imagine going through something like that. But the cops didn't even know what they were going to find. They didn't know that Gypsy wasn't, disabled. They thought that this guy was her boyfriend, went in there and tried to hurt her. Obviously, when they saw her walking, it was extremely confusing for sure, but they put the pieces together very quickly after that, obviously. They made their little vows to each other to protect each other, not rat each other out, but they ratted each other out as quickly as possible, especially since Nick did it first. Now, were there some tactics done between the police officers to get them to talk to each other? I mean, to get them to talk about each other? I mean, yeah, hell yeah. But I see that Nick turned first. In the book, she talks about how she continuously kept lying to the police officers, and it was just not working out in her favor. Now, Gypsy also had no idea none of this was going on in the news because it was bizarre. It was one of those bizarre cases. Even one of the inmates in the transportation vehicle had made a statement to her on how popular she was out there. Luckily for her, because everything got on the news, the family found out about things really quickly. And I believe she called her aunt, and then her aunt told her to call her dad. I believe that her dad really felt extremely guilty about not being there in her life. So it didn't matter what she said at this point. He was just happy to talk to her, and he was going to help her now more than ever. In the book, she talks about some experiences she had with roommates and other inmates. And yeah, although she didn't have the scariest time, thankfully, she ran into some pretty crazy things. But she did mention something that sat with me as well, is that they didn't really give a shit about these people's mental health or rehabilitating some of them. They just medicated them. And we're not talking about the prison itself. We're talking more about the jail. The jail was overcrowded, and she had roommates coming in and out. They had a little cell, a little bathroom. Most of her roommates didn't even have clothes because they were on suicide watch. It's scary in there, and I can only imagine. I hope for the future, I see it happening, but I hope that a lot of our inmates will get rehabilitation options, and not just bullshit, like actual rehabilitation. There are some prisons that don't have anything for anyone. It depends on, what you did, all that jazz. But I see one day it will happen. Our Gen Z will make damn sure of it. While in jail, she did really well. She got her GED. She did certificates for, basically like therapy things. She wrote her book. She fell in love. She hooked up with other inmates. She went through her adolescent stage. She was goth for a few months. Like, she went through a lot of stages, and she had her routines. She was never put in the shoe until that threat came out that she was trying to escape prison. And she said that was the most terrifying experience for her. There's also something else that happens. When you are in a murder for hire, or, somebody that kills somebody directly, there are these like evil spirits that kind of slip in and out of your brain, of your head, that are constantly there to remind you of what you did. And she gets that too, a lot. And although she tried to date some people and was called a pillow princess in jail, I think she is bisexual. And perhaps, maybe after her Ken chapter, she will eventually get to a point where she's comfortable with that idea. But right now, she's just enjoying the man train. She does talk about her relationship with Ken and that he made her feel so incredibly special. And then, of course, he let her go. I know what he said to her and why he said it to her. Like, he told her that he had to let her go because, she needed to be freed, and then, maybe she'd come back, blah, blah, blah. He even moved on to a new relationship. Like, I don't believe any of what he's putting down. Sorry, Gypsy. I know when it comes to this guy, you got some seriously rose-colored glasses on, but I don't buy what he's putting down. I really don't. I've been in many relationships in my past, and I didn't see when I was being duped, but you're definitely being duped by this guy. Let's talk about Ken for a minute. Ken claimed that he was a very private person. And I mean, if that was the case, so why the fuck are you mailing an inmate with a big story that is on Lifetime? Like, you only reached out to her because you saw her on a documentary. You can't go into something like that expecting that your life is going to be private. Like, it's not going to happen. I don't care who you are. And it was like a fame thing. He liked her, yeah. He thought she was really great, yeah. But really, from what I see, although he may have liked her, there were some intentions I just don't feel like were true and accurate. He was also able to easily manipulate her, and he liked that too. Once things got out about their relationship, that's when he pulled away because he did not want to be seen in the public eye. And I really feel like his family had a huge say in this as well. I think that Ken is somebody who listens to his family a lot and their opinions and suggestions. And I think that they had said, look, you need to cut it off. This relationship is going to make you lose your job. Bad reputation. She's got a bad reputation. Like, I see that they said everything that they could to get him to leave her. And he was like, no, you're right. And moved on to somebody else. He let her go because he just felt like she would be more of a problem than anything else, which is why she ended up clinging on to Ryan. She was hoping that she would find something else. She was devastated, but she was looking for a guy to talk to. And of course, because he was from Louisiana, there was that connection. She felt like Ryan wouldn't leave her. Like, that's the kind of vibe she got. And she was totally honest with Ryan about how she felt about Ken. She gave it to him straight because she wanted him to know and understand that, look, I'm still in love with this guy. I'm still fucked up about this guy. But Ryan went forward anyway because Ryan himself was desperate. I also believe that Ken may be gay, maybe hiding that from his family too. There might be some potential there as well. But there's just something about Ken that I can't put my finger on. Anyways, I believe that they will have another child. I feel like they're going to have a boy. I think it's going to be a few years before this little one comes about, but I feel like the relationship will continue to be destructive. I'm also thinking they'll get married first as well, and then eventually they will separate. There will be a big announcement about it, yada, yada, yada. Now, when it comes to Ryan, I am not a fan of Ryan either. I have been in a situation like that. There's this certain trapped feeling when it comes to certain marriages with certain people. Now, Ryan is one of those people that, in my opinion, needs to know everything. He was very suspicious of Gypsy already. I see he's been cheated on many times. He was afraid he was going to get cheated on. He knew it deep down inside that she didn't love him in the way that he loved her. She did love him, but just not like that. And Ryan was hypersensitive about it and wanted to follow her, watch what she's doing. He felt like he was entitled to watch who she was texting, that he could say what he wanted to say to her. He tried to interfere with the relationship between her and her father. Like when she wanted some time alone with her family, he had a hard time with that. Like it was another trap. Now, if Ryan had just been like cool and chill and just let her do her thing, being with her family, living her life. She had never been freed from anyone. She was with her mother, then she went to jail, and now she's with you. Again, another person that's trapping her into a bubble. With Ken, I believe, lives in a different state. I'm not sure. I think things are going to change there. Like, I feel like the two of them are going to be living together. Something's going to happen. But I think that gave her at least a bit of freedom. And Ken doesn't have that energy. He doesn't have that energy of like keeping her in a bubble, which is why I think she's super attracted to him. But unfortunately, Ryan does. So I agree, and I know why Gypsy ran, because he was very similar to her mother in that regard. I do believe that once Ken and Gypsy break up, I think that Ryan and her will have like a brief moment just to communicate. But I think Ryan will have already moved on. I see Ryan will have a wife and a child here within the next like couple of years. He'll get over the Gypsy stuff. He is still into her. He's still mourning over her. He still misses her. He's hoping she has a realization and comes back, but that hope is slowly dying off. There are a lot of people putting out there like a lot of unnecessary rumors, like the family's having some conflict. No, they're not. They may be trying to figure out their footing, but I don't see that. Gypsy and her dad, Gypsy and her sister, Gypsy and her mom are having problems. Do they tell each other things straight? Yeah. They're very, very blunt with each other, which isn't a bad thing. I think it's good to be blunt. Sometimes it can be hard to hear the truth, but I think they are good. There's also another rumor floating about the Gypsy's going back to jail. No, she ain't. She's not going back to jail. There's going to be a lot of people out there. Like, there's a lot of people that to this day call and try to get her to go back to jail. Like, it's fucked up. Pay attention to your own lives. Like, stop. Like, why are you harassing her? You don't even know her. It's fucking crazy. But they will stop at nothing to get her back behind bars. And it's not happening. So stop calling the police. They're not doing it. All that's doing is making you look bad. I see some people getting in trouble for doing this. I also see that Gypsy is going to come back. And some of these big creators that are coming at her heavily and suing the shit out of them. She's going to sue the dentist that took her teeth. Like, there's a lot of things that are going to happen. I do believe, though, that there is some neighbor-related drama. So Christine had told one of her, I think it was her neighbors, like it was like a family friend, but I also think it was a neighbor, about when Gypsy Rose was getting out. Person sold it off to the tabloids, blah, blah, blah. And like something could have happened to Gypsy while in there. And I think that there's some neighbor drama. So I would say that there's somebody selling or going to be selling some stories to the tabloids in relation to Gypsy, but nothing bad's happening. It's just to kind of get a rise out of everybody. She also put in her book that she was going to share all of this information with her future children and her child that she was pregnant with, obviously Aurora. And she will share all of this, which is why she said she wrote the book to begin with, so that she can have something to reference to her child when, in fact, the child is old enough. But if I'm going to be honest, I think that Aurora is going to end up going to possibly a public school at first and then a private school. But from what I can see, she's going to get told some shit very early on. When it comes to the show, they're probably going to record maybe another 2-3 seasons, and then that show will come to an end. I think Ken is going to be portrayed in a very aggressive manner in the next season, which is going to piss him off. But I see they have a contract for the next show as well. They are not going to show their daughter, which is going to be hard, but I do see that they'll be able to manage that too. When it comes to Gypsy and her family, I feel like they have an okay relationship now. I feel like they're finally all getting, used to each other, happy again. But that is basically what I have for today's episode for you guys. Next time, we will be back for Dee Dee's channeling session, which will be really interesting. I'm looking forward to it because I am not a fan of hers. And I know that she's going to say some things to make me mad. With Shanann, I really enjoyed talking to her. This is going to be much different. It's going to take some time because I do have to make sure that Dee Dee's words are exactly how it's being said. And but anyways, guys, I'm so happy you came. And I appreciate you guys. We'll be back for our next episode for Natalia Grace Part 1. You will not want to miss that. Until next time, guys, stay freaked out.